You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This isn't a blood hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I am your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon if you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show and keep those generators running in the Wayne Manor study. Just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 198. Yes, creeping ever so closely to episode 200. Special guest there. But we also have a special guest today, too. As you can see, the book of choice is called Venom, by request of our guest. And we'll get into that here in just a second. He's been on this show before. Back in the episode, he just reminded me before we started recording, episode 122, we talked Dark Knight, A True Batman Story. He just launched a new series, comic series, Dick Tracy. It's Alex Segura. Alex, thanks for coming back on the Batman Book Club.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited to chat about probably my favorite Batman story ever.
Now, I don't want to hold you to it. Episode 122 was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think you did say this was your favorite Batman story then, because I pushed you on it. I pressed you on it. Whenever
I think
somebody's on here,
I
press.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Yeah, I love them both for different reasons. It's just this one really speaks to me. It's such a key period in Batman's history, and it's such a unique story. It just starts off so strong. I mean, it's Denny O'Neil, so you can't go wrong with Denny, but I think it's also like one of his best Batman stories, which is saying a lot. And the art is pretty stellar, and it just covers like uncharted territory, I think, for Batman.
Absolutely. Before we hop into that one, I do want to mention really quick that you just last month kicked off, I just said, Dick Tracy, Mad Cave Studios, you're the writer. Let's talk about that really quick.
Yeah, so Dick Tracy #1 came out at the end of April. It's co-written by me and Mike Morrissey, and art by Geraldo Borges, creative consultant Chantel Amy Osmond, great colors by Mark Englert, and amazing letters by Jim Campbell. And it's a very, I would say, kind of neo-noir take on the Detective in Yellow. It's our vision for the character. It's kind of like, what if Dick Tracy was in the world of LA Confidential? So I think it'll speak to a lot of fans, like hardcore fans of Dick Tracy, but also it's very accessible to new readers. So if you know nothing about Dick Tracy, just what you saw in the movie or what you've heard about the movie that came out like in the 90s. If that's your touchstone, you will not feel lost. It's got all the big elements, a lot of familiar faces in terms of villains and supporting cast, but it's also a little bit of a slow burn. Like, we start strong in terms of action, but we're not going to throw every villain out there at once. So Mad Cave has been very gracious in giving us a ton of runway for this book. So we hope to be there for a nice long time. But if you're a fan of the character or just a fan of great crime comics, I hope you'll check it out.
I can definitely attest to, I think everybody knows who Dick Tracy is. The iconography of Dick Tracy. They know that's Dick Tracy, but maybe they aren't familiar with the world or anything. And I'm one of them, honestly. I haven't read a ton prior to, and I did read issue #1. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Not just saying that because you're on here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I loved the look. I loved the vibe, the feel of it all. And I'm, not a Dick Tracy expert, and I was not lost at all. It was completely like, I can totally attest to that of anybody can jump in on issue 1. Don't feel lost at all. And it really has me look forward to the next issue. How many?
Yeah, and there's a surprise in #2 that I think jaws will drop in terms of like what your expectations are and what you think we can do with these characters. I think it'll really be a fun surprise.
Scooby-Doo shows up. Did not see that coming.
Space Ghost pops in.
Space Ghost, yeah. How many, is this like an ongoing series, or is there
It's an ongoing
number? Okay.
Yeah, it's
Excellent.
an ongoing. So, the first arc will be 5 issues, and then we'll continue on after that, and hopefully have a nice long stint on the character. But yeah, we're excited to do it. I think the response has been resoundingly positive, which is always flattering and nice. And yeah, we're playing with expectations, but also kind of bringing in people with the familiar iconography. It's the Dick Tracy you knew and loved if you're a fan, but it's also easy to understand if you are not, like me and Michael, owning a doctorate in all things Dick
Yeah.
Tracy. You'll be fine. Yeah. Yeah.
So issue 1 can track down comic shops, buy it digitally. When does issue 2 come out?
Issue 2 comes out early next month, so it's
Okay.
it was end of April, so now it'll pick up in early June, and the first issue sold out, so you might have
Sweet.
some trouble finding those first print runs. But Mad Cave is going back to press with a really cool new cover by Michael Walsh.
Awesome.
That should be easy to find, and you can grab it at your local comic shop or digitally wherever you get your comics.
There you go. Comes with a definite recommendation from
Thank
me.
you.
And now let's jump from one detective to the next, and let's talk some Batman, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Specifically, Batman Venom. This was a story written by the great Denny O'Neil, with art by Trevor Von Eden. Inks, I want to call out definitely Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. That's a name people are familiar with. It's
The
released
legend. Yeah.
The legend. They released in 1991 in the Legends of the Dark Knight title, in which, if anybody listens to this regularly, you know that I bring it up a lot. Of like, that is such a good title of books.
Yeah.
It was in issues 16 through 20, available physically in issues, collected in. I thought just one trade paperback, but I've seen another version, like a more updated copy of a trade paperback. You can hunt them down. You'll have to pay a little bit more than
I think there's a
like
new
regular
deluxe edition.
price.
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, my experience was with the Legends of the Dark Knight, which I loved that book as a kid.
Yeah.
Just like these kind of
Mhm.
year one tales, and a lot of them, Denny wrote a lot of them early on. But I also had the trade. I think I eventually just bought the trade because I couldn't find one of the single issues.
Oh, that isn't that the worst?
Yeah, yeah. I was like, well, I'll shell out for the trade, and it just made me reread the whole thing again, which is fine.
Oh darn.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, it's available if you need to find it. Also, you can find it on digitally to purchase. You can find it on DC Universe Infinite, and also the trade is collected on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla. For this conversation, Alex, which version did you
Yes.
read?
I read the trade. I saw the print trade on my shelf, and I was happy to read that. I think the one I had was the DC Bullet logo with Batman's grinning like drug fueled face on the cover.
Okay. Was it
Not
this
not the
trade?
not the yes, that one. Yeah, that's
That
the one
one.
I've
Okay.
had. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not the
That
newer
is,
version, which has the kind of the DC swoop logo
yeah.
with like literal pills like falling from the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. So the version I just held up is, I mean, it has a copyright date of 1993. So I think this was the first collected version of that. The cover painting by Russell Braun. What a fantastic cover, I
Yeah,
think that
just
this is.
terrifying.
Love
Yeah,
it.
just like
Yeah.
a haunting image.
It says painting. I mean, it would have gotten me. I would have felt like it was like a sketch, like very sketchy, but yeah, I love this. Love this cover. Do you remember when you first read this?
Yeah, I was a kid. It must have been
Wow.
a little bit after it came out. I guess it came out when you just said it. I'm sorry to
91.
91. I think I
Mhm.
was a little bit older. I remember reading it at my dad's house as a kid and just being really disturbed by it, but in the best
Yeah.
way possible. I think it was just I love those. I had just read Year One as well for the first time, I think. So I really loved the stories that fit into that space. Year One, pre-Robin. Not that I have anything against Robin, but just
Hmm.
before Batman really kind of became a franchise almost. Before the huge
Yeah.
supporting cast, um, before things got really big for him, where he was really just like a street level hero trying to figure out his way
Hmm.
way around everything.
That's, I mean, right here I'm showing. I'm wearing a Batman and
Yeah,
Robin
yeah,
t-shirt. I
yeah,
don't have anything against Robin, but my preference, I like solo Batman. So
yeah,
this was included to me as a gift with like a bundle of comics. It was just like a stack of comics gotten from a shop, and then this was like in the middle of it. My only bugaboo is that this has this heavy, I don't know if you can see this heavy crease right in the
yeah.
middle.
Oh
The
wow.
cover was folded, and I'm like, ah, but it's okay. I got it was either like 2008, 2009, maybe like around
Mhm.
Christmas time, I think. And yeah, so
Okay,
that
so
was
it's
the
still kind
first
of
time I
fresh
read
to
it.
you. Like, yeah, wow. It's got those,
Yeah,
and the single issues have these great covers by Garcia Lopez that
yeah.
just are. I'm looking at the first issue one now. It has Batman walking through the sewer with this lantern in front of him, and it's just like the colors or the palette of colors is very
Hmm.
limited, so it feels almost like almost spot color. But it's a really, it's I mean, I don't know if you want me to speak generally about it, but what I
Well,
love about, yeah, go ahead.
let me no, let me ask you this last question, and it might be like what you're about to say too. Of
Yeah.
like when I asked if you want to come back on, we landed on Venom. Why
Mhm.
Venom?
Yeah, I think we talked about this for once a little bit, like before we went into the recording. But what I love about this story is that it gives you a Batman that loses. You
Hmm.
out of the gate, Batman is unable to save this young. I'm not spoiling anything. It's in the first few pages of the comic.
We can
Batman is,
spoil away.
yeah, Batman
It's
is
30 years old.
he's called on a case. There's a girl that's trapped underwater. Someone has tied her up, and the water is rising, and he basically has to lift, or he swims down and he has to lift something to get to her, and he fails. He's unable to move this boulder,
Mhm.
and she dies, and it haunts him. And look, Batman's like the kind of person that is prone to being haunted by tragedy. Obviously, his parents, and we'll see that kind of be a trope throughout his career. But we very rarely see Batman fail. We
Mhm.
see bad things happen around him, and he learns from these bad things and becomes a better quote unquote Batman. But this is a moment where he doesn't save the day, and I think it's interesting because obviously it's early in his career, and that to me is a more interesting Batman. It's a Batman that makes mistakes, that hasn't refined his technology, gotten the bat plane and the bat copter and all the other
Mhm.
bat tools, and he doesn't have the kind of, basically sometimes Batman can become a team book. He's got all the Robins, he's got Nightwing, he's got Batgirl, he's got Oracle, he's got all this like team effort, which is really interesting. But this is a very solitary Batman, and you see him fail, you see him unable to save this child, and that kind of drives him nuts.
Mhm.
That's really the core of Venom. And what's interesting from a macro level is Denny O'Neil in particular, who was editor of the Bat Group at the time, used Legends of the Dark Knight and other miniseries to plant seeds that would eventually come into play in Nightfall. So you see
Mhm.
the introduction of Venom. You see, I think this was the introduction of Santa Prisca, which is a Latin American country, a fictional Latin American
Mhm.
country where Bane was born, and the early days of Bane were told. Which was told by Chuck Dixon in I think it's Vengeance of Bane, um, a separate miniseries. But a lot of that kind of editorial legwork was done by Denny in stuff like this, Sword of Azrael, which introduced Azrael and the Order of Saint Dumas, and all of that comes into play much later in Nightfall. But
Yeah.
I think without this really table setting, it wouldn't have had as much impact.
Yeah.
Venom obviously is integral to Bane's story, but even you take all that stuff away, I admire it as an editor and as a publishing person. Like, wow, this guy was playing the long game and really like planting seeds for things. At its heart, Venom is a story about failure. It's a story about addiction. It's a story about a man that's so driven to succeed at what he wants to be. It could be a corollary to, a parallel to the story of the athlete, like you want to be so good at what you do that you're willing to sacrifice your own morals and ethics to be the best.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also a story about overcoming addiction, and it's told in a truncated timeline. Like you get the entire addict's narrative in a
Yeah.
few issues, and over the span of I think like maybe a couple months is I think there's a period where he's in the cave, basically going cold turkey on Venom.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like you can tell that Denny is writing from a place of personal experience and personal trauma. I mean, I don't presume to know his story, but from what I've read, there's some element of that to it, and so it feels like really a personal story for him and something that's really heartfelt and human. And it's a Batman that I find the most interesting. Those early days of Batman, where he's
Yeah.
still kind of a screw up. Like he's very good
Mhm.
theoretically. Like he's done the world tour. He's learned all
He's
the
got somewhere
stuff.
to go still.
Yeah, he's still got, yeah, he's
which
still
is
on the
interesting.
rise. Yeah,
Hmm.
whereas like I think a lot of Batman stories are on the plateau. Like he's
Hmm.
Batman, like he can do all these things and it's cool and he's great at pretty much great at everything. He's the smartest detective. Here he's still learning and he's still failing and he's still struggling, which I find really compelling as a reader. And I found so anyway, he's unable to save this girl, which haunts him, and he's approached basically by, I'm blanking on the guy's name, but he's approached by someone who can provide the answer to him. This doctor that has figured out a way. What's that?
Randolph Porter.
Yeah,
The girl's
Randolph
name's
Porter. So
Sissy Porter is the victim at the beginning, and then
so
her
he's the
father
dad. Yeah,
Randolph is a scientist, and we're gonna talk about him and I guess you could say an accomplice of his in General Slaycroft. Something that
yeah.
you'd mentioned about like Denny O'Neil planting seeds in the trade paperback that we have has a nice introduction by Denny in which
Hmm.
he talks about the seeds of this story he tried to incorporate like twice before, once in the 70s in a Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter story, but he didn't feel
Right.
like there was enough there. Then in the 80s he tried to do it in a Detective Comics issue, but he felt like that was too short to tell the story, so
Hmm.
then this was third time's the charm. And in that introduction as well, it even talks about like at the time that he's writing this introduction, Nightfall was just starting to begin, and like a major player in that is Bane. And what's a
Right.
major player in Bane? Venom, which was, related to this story. And I'd read somewhere, but I don't know the debut of the Venom character, but I thought I'd read somewhere about, as they started thinking about Nightfall, well, Bane could have been named Venom,
Yeah.
but by then Venom was existing in Spider-Man's world.
I
Now,
feel like Venom. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, it's okay. I don't know my timelines with that very. I know that I read that, but it's like don't hold me to it as fact. I want to check more, but the time period's very matching up to where
Oh yeah.
they
I think.
couldn't name him Venom.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of overlap. I feel like Venom the character was early 90s, like 91, if not even 1990 or 89.
Okay.
But yeah, they couldn't call him Venom, but it really is a testament to just Danny's ability as a group editor to like weave
Yeah.
these ideas and have the stories play off each other and then pay off. I think I read Venom the trade as Nightfall was coming out.
Okay.
And I don't mean like Knight's Quest and Knight's End. I mean like the core Nightfall stuff was still
Yeah.
happening. So I was reading this stuff and I was just like, so even as a kid, I was like really so blown away at how much organizational skill it took to execute that. Like he's planting
Yeah.
seeds for stuff in Batman's earliest years to play out that are playing out in real time with Nightfall. It was really impressive. But at the heart, it's a really compelling human story about
Yeah.
failure and addiction and overcoming those challenges to become yourself again.
And I think this is it's I don't know if I want to say fun to revisit this because it's not one that I revisit often since
Yeah,
I've had it, because it's like it's a good story, but it's like it's not a feel good Batman story. It's
no,
heavy, so I can only imagine you as a kid reading this of like how heavy this stuff is, and all of it because it is of like Batman's my favorite hero. I like seeing him, rise and doing the right thing. So of course it's hard to watch when he falls. And he doesn't just
right.
fall. Half the story is him just like spiraling. And it's just like,
Yeah,
oh, and it not to
and
mention the
he
story
becomes a
starts
villain.
off. And yeah, and how the story starts of like you open up in the first 5 pages and a child dies. Like,
Yeah, I
whoa.
remember. Yeah, I remember reading that, and the artists. I'll just say the artists because there's so many great talented artists like Trevor Von Eden, who's a Batman
Mhm.
legend, and who I just learned like I don't know how I read something on Instagram where someone posted an old Frank Miller interview where he was, I guess, intended to be the artist on Batman Year One, and for whatever reason, Mazzucchelli then
Wow.
stepped in, and obviously Mazzucchelli did an amazing job. But you can see a lot of what appealed maybe to
Hmm.
Miller at the time in Von Eden's pencils, and then they pair so nicely with Garcia Lopez as the
Yeah.
finisher. I'm personally amazed that this book hasn't. It very rarely makes those top 10 Batman stories list, but to me, it's in the pantheon,
it
in terms
it
of
seems
great Batman stories.
seems heralded by fans, but yet
Yeah,
it's like they don't. for some reason this isn't a book that DC just like reprints and makes it widely available like physically.
Hmm.
It's not too hard to find. I listed, like 10 minutes
Yeah,
ago of how you can find it, but it's all digitally. And a lot of people want, give me that book to put on my bookshelf.
right.
And so I'm waiting for the deluxe edition to come at some point, like
Yeah, it's got
because
to be
it's
in the pipeline. It's such a classic.
uh-huh. Absolutely. Have you ever did you ever get to meet Denny O'Neil?
I did, yeah, which was a huge honor and privilege. I remember when I was at DC doing publicity, he sat in my office for, I want to say like 40 minutes, just kind of, one thing that we did, and yeah, yeah, it was truly a blessing. One of the things that we did in the marketing department is that we would liaison with Warner Brothers to coordinate like the DVD extra stuff, and that
Yeah.
involved a lot of creators coming in. Um, Paul Levitz was in charge, so he did a lot of those interviews, and Dan DiDio was there, but also a lot of talent came in, and Denny obviously had so much to say because he had such a huge influence on Batman over the years. And so I think it
Mhm.
was one of those days where he had come in to do some back matter interviews. And I remember my boss at the time was like, "Do you mind if Denny O'Neil sits with you for a little while before his interview starts?" And I was like,
I'm busy.
yeah, I do not mind at all." And he was everything that I think you see in other interviews. He was very gracious, very thoughtful, very charming, and yeah, I felt, I think Denny had a journalism background, so you can see that in a lot of his stories. Obviously,
Mhm.
the most obvious is, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, the speedy heroin addiction stuff. But I think a lot of his stuff, even the more big picture stories like Justice League or Superman, were still rooted in truth and reality and
Mhm.
in facts. And I mean, he wrote a story. He would write stories about Green Lantern and Oa and spacefaring stories, but they all felt very grounded and character driven and based in the flaws of his characters. And so I could always, I think Denny, especially his run on The Question, was hugely influential to me as a writer. Just the way he would approach story and explore himself through exploring
Mhm.
these characters was really inspirational to me. So yeah, I did get to meet him. That was something I'll remember a long time, just because even then he was already one of my favorite writers, and just kind of like people and how he like
Yeah.
spoke about the craft and what he did. And so yeah, and Venom, like we said, is I think one of his best Batman stories, if not his best.
I mean, it's up there. I guess I've never done a favorite Denny O'Neil Batman stories. Yeah, I'll jot that down. That could be a fun episode.
Yeah,
This would
yeah,
make the
definitely.
list. Whoever between me and whoever else would be on here, that would definitely make the list. Like I had mentioned, well, we talked about how the story opens up and with the girl that passes and I mean, we can take a break from Batman and talk instead about the villains. And I think that this Randolph Porter and then General Slaycroft might be two of the most evil people in a Batman story. And I
Yeah,
totally forgot how kind of cold they are. And then I read it this time and I was just like, man, these are some truly, and I thought it was just, I mean, tips you off right at the beginning of some of the stuff that Randolph says when Batman goes and visits him right after Sissy
it's
passes.
chilling. It's really chilling, and I think there's a theme here
Man.
about fathers and children. Like
Hmm.
Slaycroft literally manipulates his own child to be a tool of his geopolitical plans, and Porter seems completely cold and unmoved by the death of his daughter, like literally shrugs it off.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know if this is what Denny was saying, but one of Batman's saving graces throughout the story is Alfred. Like Alfred's
Yeah.
loyalty and dedication and love for Bruce and Batman is very much what gets him through the darkest parts of this time. Like I don't think he would have survived. And look,
Hmm.
obviously, we're talking about fictional characters and corporate IP and la di da, but I think you're so immersed in the story Denny is telling
Yeah.
that you almost doubt that he's going to get through it.
Hmm. I mean, strengths of strong storytelling. It's
Yeah,
like we
yeah.
can have an in-depth conversation about a 5-issue comic book story. And then by the time that you and I are done talking, we'll probably still be like, oh, we could have been going another hour probably about
Oh
this.
yeah,
We
this is yeah.
broken down
There's so
page by
much.
page.
Mhm.
But like, I mean, you said how cold or how chilling like Randolph is when, I mean, what's his first thing that he says when Batman says she died alone in terror and pain, and he's just like, well, who knows what awful things would have happened to her if she lived, eh? And then just moves on. and there's
Yeah, and
no emotion. There's no it. You can just feel it's just words, but you can feel the coldness in that to where that's like your first indicator of like something's off with this guy.
yeah, this guy is not good. And the fact that he can shrug off his daughter's death is chilling, and as I reread it now as a parent, it's just doubly haunting. Like as a kid, I
Yeah,
was just like, wow, this is bad. Like these are bad guys doing bad things. And
yeah.
now they've corrupted Batman, who's to me at the time and still to this day is like an icon of heroism and doing the right thing. But yeah, just like probably some of the creepiest people you'll read in a Batman
Mhm.
comic, read about in a Batman comic.
And there's just like, I didn't write them down. There are like one line comments spread throughout from each one of them that, reinforces that
Hmm.
evilness.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
what do you think? So this is, what was Sissy being in that trap? Is that something that you think that he set up himself?
Um,
Because I
yeah,
guess
I
that's
think
a
it's
little
probably
head
some.
scratcher on me. I feel like, but I almost feel like that's almost too dark. But then
Yeah,
also like my mind keeps going back to that of like, well, then he's not in any way distraught about it. And like, so who tied her up? And it just everything links back to he is part of it.
it is one of those things that is left unsaid, and I think it works better that way because it
Hmm.
opens the door for the reader to speculate and think
Yeah.
worse of Porter, or not think better of him, but at least not go down that dark path. But um, if anyone did it, I think it was probably Slaycroft if there was a villain that pushed for it to happen. But
Yeah.
I do think it is believable that whoever did that was after the Venom. And,
Hmm.
because they have that back and forth of like, oh, you said that they didn't want a ransom. And Porter holds up the pills and says they wanted this. And that's what kind of moves the plot forward. And you have that iconic scene of Batman literally looking at the pill. And
Yeah.
already you can tell like he's just a really smart guy and he's formulating like, could this have saved this girl?
And I think what O'Neill helps drive home with the is his conversation. You've already brought up Alfred. So before he goes and he sees the Randolph, he even talks to Alfred about, about
Hmm.
how he wasn't strong enough and like, yeah, like how good of a detective like in the end that kind of doesn't matter. And I feel like there aren't like I can't think of one right now where that's more apparent than here, which I think
Yeah.
it's just a constant building that O'Neill does to get him to that point of where, as much as you don't want to believe it, you can definitely believe it when Batman does, you know, succumb to the pills and like what they'll promise him and guarantee him.
Yeah, and this is a good example of just Denny at his like tightest plotting. Like a lot of
Mhm.
ground is covered in that
Yeah.
first issue. Like he really tees up everything. He tees up the conflict. Like he failed, Batman failed, throws in the plot point of the pill, has that the echoing image of Batman looking at the pill. But then there's a lot of the bulk of the first issue is Batman injuring himself, pushing himself too far, straining, getting pounded, like totally
Hmm.
defeated numerous times, and the haunting image of this girl. And then finally, I think you obviously see that this was the plan. Like this is the
Hmm.
plan that Slaycroft and Porter had, and that broken Batman then returns to Porter and basically says, "Yeah, I need this stuff to like be better at what I want to do to not allow this to happen again." Which is like the ethos, Batman's core ethos. Like he
Hmm.
never wants a child to suffer in the way he suffered, and he's failed at that already, like out of the gate.
Hmm. Those are the saying of the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right.
And I think that Denny puts some, he doesn't say those words in the introduction, but he says something about, uh addicts, they don't set out to become addicts. They
Yeah.
don't like they have good intentions of like this promise of gonna feel better, gonna get better. And it's like that totally applies to Batman's motivation in this. He's at the lowest of like he failed. Not only did he fail like a human, he failed in like an innocent child,
Yeah.
which
His
is like
key.
just as hurtful, I think, for him, just as heavy for him as it is for anybody that reads, this stuff. So it's just so plausible by that last panel where he is like a very disturbing last panel as he has popped those pills and or no, it's after he's busted up the dude in the bar and he's just laughing.
Yeah,
The
it's
maniacal
terrifying.
laugh.
Yeah,
That's
it's
not
really
okay.
creepy.
Batman shouldn't be laughing. Like,
Yeah,
not
no,
like
not
that.
like that. Not like that. And not like enjoying the destruction he's cutting loose on. It's really terrifying. And it's, and yeah, I forget Denny intro, and I remember reading it when I got the trade, but he obviously has tapped into the arc of the addict and how that,
Mhm.
like it's a disease, and Batman has tapped into something that he wasn't expecting. He saw it as a way to not make that mistake again, but then got pulled into something much darker.
Mhm. Uh, Slaycroft. So you referenced Slaycroft's son and Timmy, who's one that basically Batman stumbled. He enters the story, um, not by accident, but basically Batman spots him creeping
Hmm.
because Timmy needs to stay hidden, and he ends up becoming a big part of the story,
Yeah,
in the back half of the story. And through him, you kind of get to see more of the broad picture of what everybody's, or not everybody, but Randolph and Slaycroft are working toward, and basically super soldiers. And
yeah,
you see, like, it's uncomfortable watching them in Santa Prisca with these soldiers and just what they're doing to other humans, and then seeing Timmy as he builds a relationship with another woman, and then how basically the drugs affect Timmy, and then how Slaycroft just had like continues to goes after this woman with Timmy, and it's just like more of like what you said of like Denny, like peak writing, and how this is just 5 issues, and
yeah.
it's just so much, and this isn't some side story that doesn't matter. it,
No, it's
it
a key plot
does
point.
impact, exactly, key plot point, affects Batman. It like brings Batman is down to humanity. When he faces him, he doesn't see him as just some robot that he just needs to dispose of. He empathizes with him in the situation, and like his the treatment by his father, and like how horrible like this situation actually is. And I think that like Denny excels at that also, of we're not at like machine Batman sort of deal. He's very empathetic to the entire situation. He's not out to like kill anybody, take anybody off the map. He's trying to like save people and stop people.
Yeah, but one thing that's also interesting too is that he immediately divests himself of the Batman costume. Like when he is hopped up on these super
Oh,
pills, he starts wearing this almost like spirit like fedora mask cloak uniform. Because I think because you're already seeing like the undercurrents of shame with what
mm,
he's doing. And it's interesting, Denny really does hammer home the effect of the pills on not only Batman but on Timmy as well, who starts off
hmm
as this very like meek and shy and friendly and lovable kid, like almost like Steve Rogers before he takes the super serum, like this very like
yeah, good
artsy
comparison.
kid. Yeah, and but once he becomes something else, that kid is gone, and so is Batman. Like the Bruce Wayne and the Batman we know is gone. Like he starts throwing stuff once he runs out of pills. He gets enraged, and begins to build this tolerance. And then that's when the manipulation starts, where Porter and Slaycroft start asking Batman for favors, and basically kind of dangling the pills in front of him. Like if you
Yeah,
want your next hit, like it's not just gonna, the first one is free is the saying. The first one
yeah.
is free, and then you start to pay the price. And he starts to need more and more to continue to work at the level he wants to be at. It's
hmm
it's really terrifying and sad, and it's a very unique Batman story, and I think that's why it sticks with me. Is that you never see Batman become this helpless in the way that he's basically given up his biggest tool, his body.
hmm
Obviously his brain is part of that, but he has sacrificed that because he feels so tormented by his failure.
Something that, I mean, we just to get it out there, I think I already kind of said it. Alfred.
Hmm.
Alfred is excellent in this story. I love how Alfred's kind of have enough, and he does leave, but then he's right there and answers the phone call when Bruce needs him
Yeah,
most. And
yeah,
he's like, I'll be there. And he is there. He follows Bruce's instructions of lock me in the cave, 31 days. It's detox.
yeah,
I need it. And then a funny thing to me is how he impersonates Bruce or Batman's voice at the end.
yeah,
And we just
yeah,
believe it because, I mean, why
yeah,
not? Alfred would
yeah.
do it. He's a trained actor, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
it's a powerful thing because if anyone has been with Bruce or Batman through thick and thin, it's Alfred. And so
yeah.
to reach you reach multiple breaking points. You reach Batman's breaking point where he chooses to go down this dark path, but you also see Alfred's breaking point where he
hmm
realizes like, and it's a very like relatable thing. Like who hasn't been touched by addiction either through your own experience or through something you see happening to someone you care about, where you realize
Yeah.
I can't do anything for you. Like you've gone too
hmm
far and you need to really hit your own bottom to understand what you're going through. And then Batman does have that moment of clarity and then decides like I have to shake this addiction. So there's a lot. You see a lot of like Denny personally walking us through this arc of addiction, and it's really compelling. The second issue, like at the end of the second issue, where they hand Batman the picture of Gordon and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
you need to kill this guy," and he's like, "No sweat, I'll do it." It's terrifying. And as a
Yeah.
kid, I was reading this and just being like, "Oh my God!" Like he's going to kill. Obviously, I knew that it wasn't going to get there because it's a flashback
Yeah.
story, but the fact that he was willing to say, "Yes, I'm going to do it because I'm so hungry for this pill," is just terrible. And
Yeah.
yeah, really haunting to this day.
A tactic O'Neill does in this, I know, and I'm not taking away the art at all. Art's fantastic throughout. I just keep
Yeah,
referencing
it's
Denny
so
because
consistent. Yeah,
it's so good. He has so many scenes that begin mid-sentence.
yeah,
I love that. Like I
yeah,
flat out love that because that just gives a feel of realism because like I think it's something that none of us are really even thinking about. And I know that like it's totally different of like with mediums and everything, but it's like we never turn on a TV and catch the very beginning of this sentence.
yeah.
We don't jump into conversations right at the beginning. And so Denny just brings that in throughout this whole book. And it's something so small, but I'm like, I don't know what you call that as a term, I guess, but like a style, but I love it. I love that we jump
Yeah,
in midstream.
and Denny wrote it's out of print now, but the DC Comics Guide to Writing Comics. And I think one
Hmm.
of the things he said, if I'm remembering correctly, is, and it's a good bit of writing advice. It's start as late as possible in the scene to get to the meat of the scene and then leave as early as possible. Like really just get to the core of the scene. Like what is the most important part of the scene? You don't need the build up, you don't need the exposition. Get to the cut to the chase because you can also explain all that stuff as you go. You don't need
Hmm.
to like slow the reader down or bore the reader with too much like build up or too much like ramp down. Like you want to get to the crux of it, and he does that really well. Like I think this is really him at the height of his craft.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Um, I haven't read that book, but I've been advised to like track it down, find a used copy on eBay, get that,
Yeah, you should.
get
I
it.
think I think I rebought it recently. I mean, it's not cheap, but it should be on eBay. Yeah, for
Worth it.
sure. Yeah.
Um, what did I have mentioned down here? Something else. Oh, okay. So you're an accomplished writer. You've written some things. You've
Yeah,
dabbled. Let me
I try
ask
to.
you, as like from your perspective, at the end, Batman's in that dungeon and he has this master plan to escape that somehow, okay, so Denny's gotta relay in a sense Batman figuring this out to us audience without it feeling like a massive exposition dump. As a writer, what's the process of, oh, I've got this plan that I have to, like, if you were to write that scene, like, what is the process of that from your perspective?
I think usually I don't want to presume that I know Denny's process, but
Sure.
I am an outliner. Like, so I start from a germ of an idea and I extrapolate and it becomes a plot, eventually becomes a plot and then becomes a script. And then it becomes, if it's a novel, it becomes a novel. But um, I think you have the info. You have like, okay, Batman has to get out of this shark, this
Hmm.
tank or whatever the situation. It's not the shark tank. It's out of this dungeon.
Yeah.
Um, and at that point we have to relay to the reader what he's going to do. And I think I actually read this yesterday somewhere where someone basically said, I think it was Ben Percy, who's a friend of mine, and he posted on Facebook some bit of advice he'd heard that, you know the best scenes for relaying information are people walking or doing something as opposed to sitting across from each other and just talking about something. Those are the most compelling ways. So it's like, how do I relay this info through action so it doesn't feel like a lecture? So it doesn't feel
Hmm.
like Batman saying, well, reader, I'm going to have to do this and this and this, and then I'll do that and that and that. And halfway through it, you're going to get bored, even if it's Batman,
Yeah.
because you don't want to see Batman lecturing. You want to see Batman doing. So I think Denny does a great job of getting into Batman's head and showing you what he needs to do while explaining what he needs to do after, so it's
Hmm.
interspersed. Like the narrative is interspersed with action. So you never feel like the plot is slowing down. I think especially in comics, a visual medium, you never want to be in a situation where you're just like in boardrooms or,
Yeah.
in these like generic spaces where it's a lot of like lengthy word balloons or captions. Like you want to show. You want to show the
Mhm.
action as much as you can, even if part of showing is telling, you know?
Yeah. Because I mean, it you name it, you come across these um plans to escape or plans to, in stories. And it's like, okay, so for this one, he's like, okay, I'm writing where he's like in this dungeon, and it's either like the only way that you can escape is to take more pills, or you're just gonna basically flood out and you're gonna drown.
Yeah.
Okay, how do we get out of that? Okay, well, there's a bed, and it's starting to
Hmm.
formulate. He's gonna break apart the bed, assemble this new thing, weight it down with these stones, and then to apply that. Okay, it has to be believable that this will work. And
Yeah,
I'm
he's
just like,
explaining it to you as he does it. And I love that scene because it really shows Batman as a detective, as a
yeah,
problem solver, as someone who can figure things out. And he's chosen, it's really the fork in the road. It's like, do I take these pills and become that monster again and maybe survive? And that's really like the addict's lament. Like, do I keep kind of living bit by bit while still hooked onto this thing? Or do I choose the harder path, which is using my brain, using my skills, using my
hmm,
abilities to figure it out? And it really, one of the more haunting moments, and I think you mentioned it in passing, is when he attacks Gordon and realizes I can't do this, and then is scrounging through the dirt to try and find one more pill to stay like at peak level.
yeah,
And that's when it clicks for him, like, I've got a problem. Like, I've really
hmm,
got a problem. And that's where we have the kind of like tear-filled call to Alfred, like, can you please come help me? And like you said, he locks himself in the cave. But it's really like peak Batman, like why we
hmm.
love this character, because he's so driven and he's also willing to overcome any odds to do the right thing.
And I think we as readers too, it's like it's unsettling that scene because it's like, man, Batman, like you're kind of pathetic right now, and you're on the
Yeah.
ground, like crawling to look like you're so desperate, and it's like, man,
And he's like
Batman, you're never
smiling. He's like, I
desperate.
found it. He's
Yeah,
like, oh, I found this pill. And it's like so sad.
and I'm
Like
glad,
that's
like,
what he realizes, like that he's cheering that he's found these pills. Like, got him.
yeah.
I'm just looking at it now. It's like really such a terrible moment for him. Like he's so excited. Laughter shrieks from him and suddenly stops. He struggles to recognize the feeling that seems to be squeezing the life from him. It's like, wow.
Oh, that's well written.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That Denny O'Neil guy
Pretty
is
decent,
pretty good
yeah.
at pretty good at what he does. Yeah.
I mean, as is a custom, I mean, you'd already mentioned like the Legends of the Dark Knight title, their earlier years Batman. I do
Mhm.
appreciate we never see him, but the mentions of Harvey Dent that we get a couple
Yeah.
times in here, it's just fun to know of like, oh, he's there. It's pre
Yeah.
Two-Face. That's
Yeah.
nice. There's
It feels very
that,
cinematic.
yeah. And then Batman mentions at some point, like mentioning people he was trained by, and he mentions Descartes, which is also a nice throwback to I think 2 years prior was Blind Justice, where
Right.
Descartes was mentioned as his trainer, which many people became aware of the character after Batman Begins.
But
Um,
he's been around. Yeah.
yep, he's always been around. Uh, Something else that I noted here that I really liked is how why not Batman decides I know how I'll stop your car. I'll throw a fridge. I
Yeah.
mean that that puts a
Yeah.
smile on my face. It's
Yeah.
just kind of so random, but I like it. Um, there's and then let's see, when he talks about or he revisits Porter, he mentions oh, okay, when he goes back to Porter, this is when
Hmm.
he's gonna get the pills, and Porter says, "You're back. I'm not surprised." And he goes, "Those pills you mentioned," and then it says, "Period, Ed, period." I never understood what that meant.
Yeah. I
And
don't.
I've read it
Now
over
that
and
you
over.
mention it,
I've
yeah. Yeah.
tried to
Yeah.
look it up. I don't know, and I'm like, oh, is that like his? No, his name's Randolph. His last name's Porter, and it's not like E period D period. It's just Ed, and I never understood it, and so like it kind of haunts me now because I don't know what that means,
Yeah.
and if
Or maybe it's just
anybody,
like an echo of the last syllable mentioned. I don't know. It seems awkward.
yeah, it is, and it's like Denny O'Neil, he knows what he's doing. So it's not a mistake. I just haven't cracked what that means yet. I didn't know if you knew. It's
It
such a
might be a
small thing.
mistake.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
It might
no
be.
one's
Okay.
infallible, but I think the only low, I mean, obviously it's a low point in terms of the character, but I think the if there is a weakness to the story is that there's really like it's a very male driven story. Like the
Yeah.
only female character of note is Consuela, who is killed
Yeah.
gratuitously I mean, Denny does it in it's to build drama, but the only meaningful female character is like a means to an end, like a plot point. And I think
Mhm.
on revisit, and it's an issue I have with Batman Year One as well, that and it's something that it's of the time, but it still certainly has not aged well. Is that the only female character of note is this woman who's killed as a means to an end to show how badly Timmy has fallen, how far Timmy
Mm.
has fallen. So I think, yeah, in retrospect, I think that could have definitely been stronger.
Mm. Yeah, I'd say she's definitely a tragic. I mean, it's a
She's
brief.
definitely a tragic character. Yeah.
It's brief that she's in there, but I think like Denny, I don't, what do I want to say? Not, it doesn't feel shoehorned. It's not too quick, but like in what you're talking about too, of like also she comes in, they revisit as she's like kind of done with Timmy, and then revisits again when Timmy kills her. And so it is
Yeah.
very boom, 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 done.
She doesn't have any agency apart from her relationship to Timmy. She's very much there as a foil to Timmy's like decline. And so I think Denny does handle it with as much care as you are going to handle something like that. But
Yeah.
it does, if there is a flaw in this story, which I think is very good and very strong and a very like memorable and iconic Batman
Mhm.
story, it's that.
It's
But
that.
yeah,
Gotcha. Let me ask you some very specific questions, and then
yeah.
we'll work towards wrapping this up.
Yes, you've got a question?
Number one, what's your favorite part of Venom?
I think I'm looking at it now. It's that moment where Batman is back, but it's not, it's Bruce Wayne in this tattered Batman costume. His beard
The
is out of
beard.
control. You have this long shot. You have Batman, Alfred walking up to the
Mhm.
grandfather clock, turning it to the time where Thomas and Martha were killed, and it creaks open. You see the shadow of Alfred looming over, and then the camera flips around, and you see Bruce coming up slowly and slowly and slowly, and you have this completely shocking, almost splash page of
Yeah.
Bruce standing in front of the cave, and Alfred's like, "Let me help you." No, no, I'm all right. Are you really? Yes, I am. Thanks. Because he's himself now. He's
Yeah.
no longer hooked onto these pills. He knows he's gone through this cycle of, he's gone cold turkey, he's recovered, and now he's got to kick some ass, and he's got to
Yeah.
get back at these people that have violated him in such a terrible way.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll be honest. Maybe it's a hot take. Not my favorite image of Bruce
No,
or
yeah, definitely
Batman.
not his, yeah, not his most hygienic or healthiest looking image, but it's basically him crawling out of the gutter and
Yeah.
becoming himself again.
Yeah. It's really, really well done. I really like the three panel creep toward us.
Yeah.
And then the reveal on the next page.
And
Um,
Alfred's so Alfred. He's like,
yeah,
remarkable weight loss. Have you considered writing a diet book? And Bruce is like, I'm not sure I
perfect.
remember how to spell. It's just perfect Alfred banter, Alfred
Yeah.
and Bruce banter. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. My favorite part, I think, is his escape from the dungeon.
Yeah, that's a
I mean,
great one too.
we just spent time on it, talking about it, but I really like it because it totally relates to, like you said, Batman being a detective, which is what he felt like was a hindrance of him at the beginning. It didn't do him any good at the beginning, but he's kind of come back around and
Yeah.
utilized that to, like, mind over body in a sense.
Hmm.
And I just really like it. And I like the breakdown as it's intercut with Porter and Slaycroft's doing their evilness and turning on each other, were intercut with Batman escaping. And then it's plausible. And it's like, well, of course Batman escaped. He's Batman.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's great. It's really well done.
how about a favorite panel?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is that shot that is a favorite moment, a favorite panel. I think it's the recurring panel of Batman looking at the pill.
Mm,
Because it really sums up what the book is about. It's like his consideration, like, do I do this? Do I sacrifice and kind of give up on my ethics to become this other kind of thing? Or do I choose to just keep fighting the fight as
yeah,
Batman with the limitations I have? Like Batman's big defining thing is that he's a superhero without superpowers. Like he's a man who has built himself up to be this great vigilante and detective. And this pill will break that rule, not rule, but like kind of go beyond that, excuse me. And I think it's really evocative. And there's a reason I think that it crops up as like this motif throughout the story.
yeah. Well done. Yeah, I mean, also, you see that image, you know what it's from.
Yeah, you know what it's from. You know what it's
is.
about. Yeah, it
Yep.
says it in the second, like what the conflict is here. Like he's making a very difficult choice.
My favorite panel comes in towards the end of the story, and it's when
Hmm.
Batman crashes through the window on Slaycroft, and
Oh
who's
yeah,
torturing Porter. I mean, it's classic Batman. There's no
yeah.
words. I love images where you can create a story yourself, and I'm like, yep, that's so Batman. It looks like that's a bad guy doing something to someone else, and Batman's gonna stop him. Love it.
There's a lot. Yeah, just a
Yep.
lot of great. The art is just page one to the last page. It's just solid. There's no weak pages, no weak panels. I mean,
Yeah.
and Batman fights a shark. Like, how cool is that?
Yeah, I know. And I mean, we're gonna run out of time, but I mean, we didn't even talk about Batman. I mean, was it the jump the shark moment? Like he fought a
Yeah,
shark and won because Batman does. Maybe a nod to 60s Batman. I don't know. I
I
think the
thought it was
shark
cool.
repellent's mentioned, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even
No, it's
so,
really well done. Yeah.
that's funny. Lastly, would you like to see this adapted in animation?
Yeah, I think it would be a great, like, kind of not mature audiences, but adult animated episode, or maybe like something on Cape Crusader, which
Hmm.
I'm excited about. I can't wait to
Oh
see
yeah,
that.
same.
Um, but I think it's really a timeless Batman story. It's something
Yep.
that it really gets to the core of what makes this character so relatable and so iconic.
Yeah. I definitely would like to. I think they could definitely accomplish this story in 75 minutes and not have and really let it breathe also. They wouldn't have to cut much. I know I thought and some other people thought that it might have been Venom in Pattinson's The Batman that he injects himself with that we find out is adrenaline. But
Hmm.
he's, I thought, oh my gosh, is that Venom? Could this be laying the seeds for the sequel? He gets addicted to Venom? Wait, what? And then found out, no, it's just adrenaline. I'm like, yeah, well,
Yeah,
it could
yeah. I
be
mean, that would have been
kind of
cool. Yeah,
Venom.
yeah.
But
A
yeah, in
Venom
a cartoon
precursor.
movie, I'd love to see that. An episode of Cape Crusader, sure. Like, yeah, why not? I think yeah, like you said, timeless. It can
Yeah,
be, I mean, it worked in 91, it can work in 2024, 2031. It can work at
yeah.
any
I think
time.
the elements of a great movie or animated series episode or animated movie are all there, and it can be modernized very easily. I think there's a lot there.
Yep, absolutely. I I think I'm gonna kind of put a bow on that. I think that
Yeah,
we did a good job covering. I want to thank you, sir, for coming back on this show. I hope it's not the
my
last
pleasure.
time.
No, I'd love
Um,
to be back. I could talk about Batman all day,
all
but
day, all
yeah,
day.
yeah.
If people want to follow you so that they can follow the adventures of Dick Tracy and anything else
Mhm.
that you're up to, what would you like to plug?
Yeah, you can go. I have a website, alexsegura.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter through the website. I'm also on Instagram at Alex Segura Jr. I have a Facebook author page, which is easy to find. I'm no longer on Twitter, but I do other kind of micro bloggy sites like Blue Sky and Threads, though I'm not nearly as active on those as I used to be on Twitter. So yeah, those are the hits.
Those are the hits. There you
Yeah.
go. Make sure to follow Alex there. As for Batman Book Club, you can follow on all the socials at the Batman BC for latest episode drops and upcoming episodes. Make sure to subscribe to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel because Pete and I are going to be hopping into No Man's Land again here very soon.
Oh, nice.
Yes, we dominated the omnibus of Road to No Man's Land. It took us a long time, and he had me buy the No Man's Land Omnibus Volume 1. So we're going in. We're gonna make it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Enjoy.
oh,
Some good stuff in there.
I have been, yeah. And then if you want to support the show, a variety of ways you can do that. Patreon.com/BatmanBC, tpublic.com, and type in TBBC. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, it's 100% A-OK. Easiest, quickest, and most impactful thing you can do is rate and review
Mhm.
the show. You can go on wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio. Just go to the rate and review page, rate and review the show because the more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as Henry Ducard, who we found out was Ra's al Ghul, said in Batman Begins, the word is panic. So, for Mr. Segura, I am Ryan Lauer, and until next time, read more Batman comics.